The hallway was buzzing with the usual Monday morning chaos, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, and voices bouncing off the walls in a dozen overlapping conversations. In the middle of it all, she moved like a shadow, her steps small and quiet, her gaze fixed on the tiles beneath her feet. Her camouflage jacket, a size too big, hung loosely from her thin shoulders. The sleeves swallowed her hands almost completely, the frayed cuffs brushing against her fingers as she held the strap of her faded backpack like it was the only thing tethering her to the moment. Her hair, tied in a quick ponytail, had loose strands that framed her face. Every few steps, she could feel eyes on her, quick, darting glances, the kind that weren't just curious but judging. Snickers started behind her, low at first, like the hiss of a boiling kettle. Then came the words, sharp and cutting, delivered in the playful yet cruel tone only teenagers could master. "Hey, soldier girl, where's your gun?" One voice called from behind, followed by another, "Don't get lost in the jungle." The laughter that followed wasn't loud enough to alert a teacher, but loud enough for her to hear every note of mockery. She quickened her pace, the sound of her sneakers blending into the noise of the hallway, pretending she didn't notice. But she noticed, she always noticed. Every day since she wore that jacket, it had been the same. She could still remember the morning she pulled it from her closet. It wasn't just a jacket. It had been her father's, worn during his last training before deployment. It smelled faintly of detergent in the outdoors, and though it dwarfed her frame, it felt like armor. She thought maybe wearing it would make her feel closer to him. Instead, it made her stand out in all the wrong ways. As she passed a group of students leaning against the lockers, one of them gave a mocking salute. "Yes, sir," he barked with exaggerated seriousness, his friends erupting into muffled giggles. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to react. She had learned that reacting only fed them more. Her heart thudded against her ribs, not from fear, but from the deep, aching frustration of being misunderstood. No one knew why she wore it. No one cared to ask. To them, it was just something weird, something different, something to laugh at. She reached her locker and spun the combination quickly, trying to block out the noise around her. But over the clanging metal and chatter, she still caught the tail end of another comment, something about how she must think she was special forces. She bit the inside of her cheek, willing herself not to cry. Sliding her books into her bag, she reminded herself of what her dad used to say before he left. Hold your head up, even when the world tries to push it down. But that was easier said than done in a place where even the smallest difference became a target. She wasn't embarrassed of him, or of the jacket, she was proud. But pride felt heavy when it was always met with laughter. The bell rang, breaking the tension for a moment. The crowd shifted, and she joined the flow of students heading to class, her jacket swaying with each step. She didn't know it yet, but in less than 24 hours, the same people laughing at her now would be standing frozen in shock, their mouths silent, as the truth behind the jacket roared into their lives from the sky. The cafeteria smelled faintly of pizza and something fried, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes long after you left. Trays clattered against the metal counter as lunch ladies in hairnets moved quickly behind the glass, scooping food with practiced motions. Students filled the air with a constant hum, laughter, arguments over who got the last chocolate milk. The screech of chairs scraping across the linoleum floor. She stepped into the lunchroom with her tray balanced carefully in both hands. Her camouflage sleeves dangled past her wrists, brushing against the plastic edge. She had gotten used to the way people's eyes flicked toward her when she entered a room, but here, the stares felt heavier, amplified by the open space and clusters of students huddled around tables. As she moved toward the drink station, a group near the center of the room noticed her. One boy, tall with a backward cap, grinned and elbowed his friend. "Attention!" he barked loudly, standing from his seat and snapping into a mock salute. The sound drew the attention of half the cafeteria. His friends laughed, and another joined in, shouting, "March, soldier, march!" as he stomped his feet against the floor in exaggerated steps. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes on the milk cartons, trying to ignore them. She reached for one, but before she could pull it away, another boy's voice cut through the noise. "Hey, what's your mission today? Save us from the evil lunch lady." His table erupted in laughter, and even students who weren't part of the group smirked or turned to watch. She bit the inside of her lip and walked toward an empty table in the far corner, the one where no one ever sat unless the rest of the room was full. Her tray rattled slightly from the tightness in her hands, but she forced herself to move slowly, not wanting them to see her rush. Sitting down, she set her backpack beside her on the bench and quietly unwrapped her sandwich. It wasn't much, just peanut butter and jelly, packed the way her dad used to do when he was home. She thought about him as she took her first bite, the noise of the cafeteria fading a little in her mind. But reality snapped back quickly when a shadow fell across her table. The tall boy with the cap leaned down, resting his hands on the surface. "Hey, Private," he said in a mock-serious voice. "You gonna eat that ration or share with the troops?" His friends hovered nearby, grinning. She didn't look up. She just took another bite of her sandwich, willing him to get bored. "Ah, come on," he continued, "say something army-like." When she stayed silent, he finally laughed and walked off, the group following him back to their table like it had been some kind of victory. She exhaled slowly and stared at her food. She didn't hate them, not really. She hated that they didn't understand. That the jacket wasn't a costume. That it was the closest thing she had to her dad right now, who was somewhere far away in a place he couldn't tell her about. The lunch period dragged on, every minute stretching longer than the last. She finished her sandwich in small, slow bites, keeping her eyes on the tabletop until the bell rang. Picking up her tray, she moved toward the exit with the same quiet determination she'd entered with. She didn't know it yet, but this was one of the last times they'd ever laugh at her jacket. Tomorrow, those same voices would be silent, replaced with something entirely different: respect. The afternoon sun streamed through the dusty classroom windows, casting long, golden streaks across the floor. Outside, the muffled sounds of basketballs bouncing on the blacktop drifted in, mingling with the low hum of the teacher's voice as she reviewed tomorrow's science test. The girl sat near the back, her camouflage jacket draped over the back of her chair, its sleeves still swallowing her hands whenever she shifted in her seat. She was scribbling notes, trying to stay focused, when the static crackle of the school's loudspeaker cut through the monotony. "Attention, students," the principal's voice said, deep and deliberate, "all classes are to report to the football field immediately. Teachers, please escort your students in an orderly fashion." A ripple of curiosity moved through the room. Heads turned, whispers rose instantly. "What's going on?" someone asked from the front. "Probably another pep rally," a boy muttered, already stuffing his books into his backpack. The teacher raised her eyebrows but didn't argue, simply gesturing for everyone to line up at the door. The hallway quickly became a river of students, flowing in one direction, chatter building with every step. The girl fell into line, keeping her head down as always, but she could feel the energy around her, excitement mixed with confusion. No one seemed to know why they were being called outside, but everyone had theories. "Maybe the football team's getting some award," one girl guessed. "Nah, it's probably some boring speech," another replied. "Bet it's just some fire drill," someone else added, earning a groan from the group. She didn't offer her own guess. She didn't care much about assemblies. They usually meant standing around while the louder kids took up all the space. Still, something about the principal's tone stuck in her mind. It had been calm, but there was a weight behind it, like he was choosing his words carefully. As they stepped through the double doors, the late afternoon light hit her face. The football field stretched out in front of them, its bright green turf glowing under the sun. Teachers were already forming loose groups along the track, guiding students toward the center. The bleachers were filling fast, clusters of kids claiming seats with their friends. The girl hesitated for a moment near the edge, scanning the field. There were no banners, no podium, no sign of a pep rally. Just an open space, empty except for the faint lines marking the yardage. A slight breeze caught her jacket, making it flap gently against her legs. She moved toward the far end of the field, keeping to herself. From this angle, she could watch without being swallowed by the noise of the crowd. Her classmates were still laughing and joking, a few tossing footballs back and forth while teachers tried to corral them. The air buzzed with anticipation, but no one knew what they were anticipating. Then she noticed it: the teachers were glancing upward every few seconds, as if waiting for something to appear in the sky. One of them spoke into a walkie-talkie, listening intently, then nodded. The principal stood near the 50-yard line, His hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed toward the horizon. The girl frowned slightly. This wasn't normal. Whatever they were waiting for wasn't on the ground. She followed the direction of their gaze, squinting against the sunlight. The air was calm, the sky an unbroken stretch of pale blue, for now. Somewhere deep inside her, an unexplainable flicker of hope stirred. She didn't know why, but something told her that whatever was coming had nothing to do with a pep rally. It began as a low vibration, so faint at first it could have been mistaken for distant construction. The sound rolled in under the chatter of the crowd, a barely there hum that made the air feel heavier. A few students glanced at each other, puzzled, but most kept talking, oblivious. Then the hum deepened, transforming into a steady, mechanical thrum that pulsed through the ground. Heads began to turn upward. The girl felt it before she truly heard it, the faint tremor beneath her sneakers, the way her jacket seemed to catch tiny bursts of air, lifting slightly with each rhythmic beat of the sound. Her eyes scanned the sky again, this time with a quickening heartbeat. The principal's voice rose over the crowd. "Everyone, please stay where you are." He didn't sound alarmed, but there was a firmness there that quieted some of the noise. Teachers moved toward the edges of the field, guiding students toward the center, but their own eyes kept darting skyward. The thrum grew louder. Now it was unmistakable, rotor blades slicing the air, each revolution a sharp, commanding sound. Gasps broke out as a dark shape appeared over the tree line beyond the bleachers, moving with purpose and power. Sunlight flashed off its body, a deep matte black with markings barely visible from the distance. "It's a helicopter," someone shouted. "No way, look at the size of it." Another voice followed. The crowd's noise swelled as the Black Hawk came fully into view, its massive blades churning the air in powerful, relentless circles. It approached at a steady, deliberate pace, the kind of flight that didn't just enter a space, it owned it. The sound was now a roar, so loud conversations were reduced to shouts. As it drew closer, the wind hit them, first a gentle push, then a force strong enough to send loose papers and baseball caps flying. The girl raised her hand to shield her face, her ponytail whipping behind her. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust, the scent carried down from the machine towering above them. The helicopter descended lower, its shadow stretching wide across the football field, swallowing the 50-yard line in darkness. The turf rippled under the sheer force of the downdraft, dust and small debris spinning into tiny tornadoes that danced at the students' feet. The landing was controlled, every motion deliberate. The Black Hawk's skids touched down with a final, authoritative hiss, and the rotors kept spinning, sending the wind in all directions. The sheer presence of the machine silenced the last of the laughter. It was impossible to joke when something this powerful was right in front of you. Then, the side door slid open. A ramp lowered, and two figures in full tactical gear stepped out first, their movements precise, scanning the crowd with sharp, practiced eyes. Their boots hit the turf in unison, the sound barely audible over the rotors. Behind them, another figure appeared, taller, carrying himself with a quiet authority. His helmet was still on, the visor reflecting the bright afternoon sun. He moved forward, his steps sure, as if each one brought him closer to something he had been waiting for far too long. The girl's breath caught. She didn't know it yet, not fully, but something deep inside told her that this moment, this arrival, was for her. The world around her seemed to slow, every sound muffled except for the pounding of her heart in her ears. The tall figure stepped down from the helicopter, the rotor wash kicking up swirls of dust that danced around his boots. The sunlight caught on the edges of his gear, glinting off metal clips and buckles, the dark visor hiding his face. Each step he took toward the 50-yard line felt deliberate, like he was crossing not just a field, but the distance of months, maybe years, spent away. Students crowded forward slightly, straining to see who it was. The bullies who had taunted her at lunch were silent now, their expressions shifting from amusement to uncertainty. The principal stood waiting at the center of the field, but the soldier didn't slow down for him. His path was straight, unbroken, cutting across the turf with unshakable purpose. The girl stood frozen at the far edge of the group, her jacket sleeves flapping in the rotor wind. She didn't want to believe what she was starting to feel, because if she was wrong, the disappointment would crush her. And yet, the way he walked, the way he carried himself, it was familiar. When he reached the halfway point, he lifted his hands to his helmet. The clasps released with a click, and slowly, almost ceremonially, he pulled it off. The breath caught in her throat. It was him. Her father. He looked older than she remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his jaw a little more angular, but his smile, that smile, was exactly the same. The kind that reached his eyes and made them soften instantly, even in the harsh sun. Without hesitation, he broke into a run. And before she even realized she had moved, she was running too, her sneakers pounding against the turf, her breath coming fast. The distance between them closed in a heartbeat, and then he was there, scooping her up into his arms like she weighed nothing. The force of the embrace lifted her off her feet, the world spinning slightly as he held her tight. The smell of him, sweat, leather, and a faint trace of the detergent her mother used, hit her all at once. She buried her face in his shoulder, her fingers clutching the fabric of his gear as if letting go would make him vanish. "I missed you, kiddo," he said into her hair, his voice low and rough with emotion. "I missed you more," she managed, her voice trembling. Around them, the field had gone still. No laughter. No jokes. Just silence, broken only by the rhythmic chop of the Black Hawk's blades still spinning behind them. The students who had mocked her jacket were now staring, some with mouths slightly open, others glancing at each other in awkward shame. The truth had arrived in the form of a man they suddenly understood was a hero, and the jacket they had laughed at was a symbol of that hero's blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Her father pulled back just enough to look at her, brushing a stray hair from her face. "I see you've been wearing my jacket," he said with a faint smile. She nodded. "Every day." He squeezed her shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. "Then you've been carrying me with you." The moment hung there, powerful and unshakable, as the wind from the helicopter swept across the field one last time. Whatever they had thought of her before no longer mattered. From now on, every time they saw her, they'd remember this moment, the day the Black Hawk landed, and the soldier everyone watched walked straight into the arms of the girl in camouflage.